So welcome back to the second part of chapter 2. So last time when we talked about, I introduced the technology trap, and I gave some reasons for the persistence of the technology trap. So if you look at the notes, you're going to realize that there's a slight difference between what I taught and what is here. Here you have three reasons for its persistence. But I would like to point out that this is if you look at the third point, a lack of technology know-how by top managers, it sort of overlaps the first 2 points, an obsession with new technology, because the point with new technology we said is that you might introduce unforeseen vulnerabilities. And then, of course, with old technology, you said if you do not upgrade the systems, it's likely that you do not benefit from, security fixes that may be part of the latest releases. So there's sort of an overlap here, but I'm going to but I guess I'm going to say we leave this point here. So we have, because you could have technology that you still, there is neither too new or too old, but you still do not really understand it. Assuming the skills of your IT people are not top notch. So I'm just saying we have to add open systems, challenges associated with open systems. As a fourth point, so this is lacking in the notes as provided. So anyway, let's continue with the next slide. So we are going to talk briefly about the basics of systems analysis and design. I think you are familiar with the systems analysis and design, but the point here though is that it is important to build security into systems. Yeah, it is important to build security into systems, and there are several ways that you could build security into systems. So ideally, you should actually incorporate security early on in system development. It is ideal that you build security from the ground up. You have it as a requirement in your development, and it is actually implemented. In many situations, you actually find that what people do is actually supplementary implementation, where first of all the what you call the functional requirements of your system are implemented. Then later on, you think about security as a by the way, yeah. So it's usually ideal that you implement security into your system if it's possible. Then of course, additional security is going to be maybe derived from securing the development process itself. You might have the most secure system, but if the development process is not secure, for instance, if you have a top secret organization, you'll find that the people, if you're going to create software for the CIA, you're going to find that people that are going to be involved in the project will have to be, first of all, vetted by, will have to be vetted. They're going to have to be given a high level security clearance, and then they'll have to go ahead and sign things like NDAs. They'll have to sign non-disclosure agreements, and so on and so forth. So all these things are done to ensure, because at the end of the day, the biggest threat security-wise is going to originate from the people that you use. The people that you use. So if it's top secret enough, people will even be given a cover story to explain why they disappeared for maybe 6 months. So that, for instance, if you have if you've got foreign hostile elements, that they do not even know the identities of the people that build the IT systems for your government security systems. So this is roughly the three ways you could think about incorporating security into your systems analysis and design. So then let's move on to the to security standards. So we've moved on to security standards. So when it comes to security standards, first of all, we have to address some terminology. So there's what we call the trusted computing base. So the trusted computing base is basically a logical section or compartment of your system that you can keep distinct from the rest of the system, which can be better protected from compromise. So when you talk about security standards, the standards are are said to be applied to the trusted computing base. Yeah, so that component or section of your system to which you want to apply security functionality is what you refer to as a trusted computing base. So in order to implement a trusted computing base, so this is just the part that you want to evaluate. Later on, you'll see something that we refer to as target of evaluation. So in order to implement trusted computing base, you must have a couple of things. One of those things is security policy. So the security policy will describe all the security, the entire security process of your organization or implementation. Then you'll have to have marking. Yeah, marking is about you have to be able to label objects to identify their security level and access modes that are available to subjects. So every subject has to be labeled. Yeah. If you take this in terms of the secret service, you have different documents. For instance, you'll have things like confidential, top secret, and so on and so forth. So they have to be labeled. You don't have to have color codes and so on and so forth. So similarly, you cannot implement a trusted computing base, or in other words, you can't implement security overall if you do not have a system of labeling, of identifying different resources and different actors. Then you need a system of identification. So you have to be able to authenticate subjects. You have to make sure that you are able to verify that these labels, particularly those applied to subjects, that they are genuine. So you have to be able to authenticate different agents. Then you need a system of accountability. So accountability is about backtracing and knowing that an action, backtracing actions and knowing and having a record of who did what, when. So if you don't really have a record, of who did what when, then it will be very difficult. It's like if you look at the security of buildings, if you don't have a record of who entered the building and who left the building, then it's going to be very difficult for you to implement security. So similarly, because many a time, what really happens is, for instance, if you have an attack, many a time you realize that you've been attacked by looking at the log activity. But if you don't have a record of the log of what really happened, who did what when, of which account accessed which object at what time, then it might be very difficult for you to even discover that you are attacked at any one time. Then next you need a system of assurance. So the mechanisms that implement security should be, there should be mechanism to guarantee the policy, marking, identification, and accountability. So these features that you have over here, you should actually have mechanisms to guarantee and protect those features you have, so that the security implementation itself has to be protected. It can also be a target of attack. Then there's a principle, that is continuous protection. So the mechanisms that protect accountability and so on and so forth should themselves be protected. Then assurance is about ensuring that you actually have these mechanisms in place: the security policy, marking, identification, and accountability. So you should have these mechanisms in place. Then on top of that, you should actually have these mechanisms protected, because they could also be targets of attack. So moving on, so the features that would implement the things that you want, things like traceability, things like accountability, things like marking and identification. So the general features that you want to implement, in order to be able to implement those things, you need about 3 of them. You need what you call a mandatory security controls. So the mandatory security controls, these ones will define general access control. For instance, if you are going to log into a Windows system, if you're going to use a Windows system in general, it is expected that you have to log into the system. in general, you have to log in into the system to access your area. But on top of that, you could have what you call discretionary security control. So this is user defined. It is not system defined. So this is user defined. So this would apply to all. So this would derive from the security policy. It will apply to all users in general. But then for objects that a user creates, if I created a file, for instance, then if I'm on Windows, if I'm in a Windows environment, I can apply, if I created a file, if I go over here, if I go to C and create a file, yeah, I want to create new, so it doesn't seem to allow me to create it in the default. So if I create a new, let me create a new text document. So if I create a new text document, then I can actually go over here and go to the security tab and then determine, for instance, what privileges does the system have? What privilege does this user over here have? What privileges does administrator have? So I can edit these privileges, for instance, and then I can revoke some of them. So here I revoke, which is, I don't know if this will actually work because I'm revoking for myself. Then afterwards I can apply. So if this is these are what we refer to as discretionary security controls. So then of course, in order to implement anything, you have to label. Yeah, you must have a system. So labeling will have you implement. Labeling is how you implement. Labeling is how you implement marking and identification. Yeah, you cannot have marking and identification if you do not have a system of labeling. So you need labeling controls. So these enable the mandatory and discretionary controls by ensuring that all items can be labeled by security and classification information. So this will allow for consistent enforcement of controls. So let's move on to security standards. So certain aspects of security can actually be standardized, in particular the security functionality. So you can actually rate systems to the extent that they implement these things that we just spoke about, to the extent that they can be able to implement labeling and mandatory and discretionary controls. So it is possible to actually rate systems. So the other thing to note is that if a system has a higher security rating, it does not necessarily mean it is more secure. So the actual security is actually a result of how you implement the security functionality. It is actually a result of how you implement the security functionality, and it does not necessarily mean, for instance, if I bring it back to cars, we know, for instance, that a BMW is a more secure, it has better secure features than a drone, yes? But it does not necessarily mean that if you drive the BMW, you're actually going to be safer. It really is going to depend on how you drive the BMW. If you're actually going to use the security features it provides, if you're going to have the seatbelt on, if you're going to drive sensibly and not drive into oncoming traffic, because if you intentionally collide into a bus, then obviously you're going to live a much shorter life than somebody who is driving a drone and driving it carefully. So this only refers to the security capability of the system. It does not necessarily mean that this is going to translate into real security, because that will depend on how you actually use the system. So there are several standards. It is what you call the ITSEC, which is the Trusted System Evaluation Criteria, or the Orange Book, which originates from the US Department of Defense. Then you have the Information Technology Systems Evaluation Criteria, or ITSEC, which originates in Europe, and is a combination of the rationalization of several standards that were organized and united into a single standard. Then you also have the so-called common criteria, which combines elements from the TSEC and ITSEC to create a single common classification. So beginning with the Trusted Systems Evaluation Criteria, or TSEC. So first of all, the TSEC defines the TCB in terms of divisions or levels. So every system that is evaluated using the TSEC is evaluated in terms of levels, and these levels can go from A to D. Yeah, these levels go from A, which is verified design, to D, which is referred to as minimal security. So this is how systems are rated. So obviously, a level A rated system, if your system is rated level A, then it has got better security functionality than a level D system. Yeah, that is what it implies, because this is a hierarchical standard. And the other thing it also implies is that these levels are actually hierarchical. So meaning that all functionality implemented by a level C system must be implemented by a level A system. That's what it means. So all functionality, so for a system to be level A, it has to implement level D, level C, level B, and then the additional functionality specified for level A only. So this is a hierarchical system, meaning that the higher level has got to implement the lower level as a requirement before it can be, so it has to implement all level B functionality. So some of these levels actually have sub-levels. For instance, level B, which is mandatory protection, is further subdivided into level B1, which is labeled security protection, and level B2, which is structured protection, and level B3, which is security domains. So again, it is a hierarchical, meaning that a B1 rated system must implement structured protection, and it must implement security domains, because B1 is higher than B2 and B3. That's what it means, yeah. Then level C is also divided into discretionary protection, which is subdivided into C1. Rather, level C, which is discretionary protection, is subdivided into C1 and C2. So you can imagine, you can think of this in terms of, you can think of this as a pyramidal system. If I create a new document, here. So here we go. So you can think of this in terms of a pyramidal system. So you have, so you have level. Okay, this is a bit so you have level so the bottom of this pyramid, you have level D, yeah? You have level D. Then you have level C, C2. Then you have level C1. You have level C2. Then you have level C1. Then you have level B3. Then you have level B2, and then you have level B1. Then you have level A at the very top, yeah. So you have level A. So we are saying that this is actually a hierarchical system, meaning that if you have level A, it's going to imply that you implement all the levels below it. So it really implies that you've implemented the B2 functionality and then some additional functionality to qualify you to be a level A system. So please note, I'm using the term functionality, yeah, and I'm doing that, I'm doing that intentionally. So it is security functionality, not necessarily security. It doesn't really mean that you are a more secure system, because the actual security, like I said, is going to depend on how you actually implement the different. It's going to really depend on how you implement security and how you use the system and how you use that security functionality. So here you go, you have your pyramid, and this is a hierarchical system. So every upper level has got to implement all the lower levels, other levels below it. So this is how it will look like in the ITSEC classification. So let's move on. Then you have what you call the Information Technology Security Evaluation Security Evaluation Criteria, or the ITSEC. So this, like I said before, is really a rationalization of several standards. So it is a combination of several standards that were being applied in Europe, because there were several standards in Europe being applied, and they decided to come together and put them and unite them. So this is a British standard. It is actually similar. It has an alternative name as British Standard. I forget the number, 77 something. Yeah, so it is actually originating from Britain. So here, the TCB will be defined as comprising, different components. So there are those components that directly contribute to security, which are referred to as security enforcing, and then you have others that directly enforce security, which must be present, and then you have and operating correctly in order to enforce that security. So the functionality will comprise of the TOE, the target. The system to be evaluated is referred to as a target of evaluation, or TOE, or rather your TCB is actually the TOE. And it comprises all the security features taken as a whole and considered from three different perspectives. First of all, you have security objectives. So these features, the security objectives will describe why a particular functionality is required. And then you have security functions, which describe the actual function that is provided. And then you have the security mechanism, which will describe how the functionality is implemented. So the ITSEC, as opposed to the TSEC, because in the TSEC you have these blanket evaluations. You have level A, level B, level. So a system is either level A. If a system is level A, they are all level A. So it does not really go into the deeper. It does not really question, for instance, what is the exact functionality provided and how is it provided. Because the ITSEC asks these questions, it means that for the ITSEC, the levels are actually, so the ITSEC will look something like this. Because in this case you have, maybe let me just, so in this case you have something of the sort. If you are rating your systems, you actually have something of the sort. In the ITSEC, you have, so each system is rated according to the security functionality, and then you have the E rating. Yeah, you have the E rating, the evaluation level. Yeah, you have what you call the evaluation level. So you have the evaluation level. So you can have, actually you can have, are they 6 or 7? Let me just have a look and be sure. You actually have 7 evaluation levels, which go from E0 to E7 to E6 rather. Yeah. So for instance, you could have an F. You could have an F. Let's say you have an FC1 system. Yeah. If you have, so on this side you have the functionality level, the security functionality level. So you could have an FC1 rated system, and on this side you have an evaluation level of 0. Yeah. So this an evaluation level of E6. Then you could have an evaluation level of E5. Then you could have an evaluation level of E. So this could go on. You could have an evaluation level of E4, and you could do this all the way to evaluation level of E0. So what this implies, and then you could have if FC1. So all these are FC1 systems. Yeah, you could have FC1, FC1 So these are some of the the levels that you have with these are some of the levels that you have with the ITSEC evaluation. The ITSEC evaluation. So if you have FC1, FC1, so these are all FC1 systems, yeah. So but they are different because FC1 E6 is actually a higher rating than FC1 E4. When we had the TSEC, you are either a level A system. If you're a level A system, you are a level A system. We do not differentiate between different level A systems. Yeah, we do not differentiate between different level A systems. You're all equivalent. It's like when you have PhDs, for instance. When you have a PhD, they are not classified. You do not have a first-class PhD. You all have PhDs, right? You're all doctors. You're all PhDs, right? But if you're doing undergrad, yeah, you could all have degrees. You all have certificates, but some of you have first-class degrees, and others have second-class degrees, and others have third-class degrees. So there's a classification depending to the extent to which that you satisfy the requirements of that level. Yeah. So with E6, an E6 system is actually it has got a higher security functionality than an E0 system. That's what it means in the ITSEC evaluation criteria. So that's the first element. So that's the first difference, because here you have blanket evaluation, and here you do not have blanket evaluation. Then of course, it's not the first. The first is that here you have more levels. You have 10 functionality levels. This FC, you have 10 of these. Yeah. Then you have 7. Then on top of that, you actually have these evaluation levels. They are further subdivided and they are hierarchical according to the level to which they satisfy. You have a bit of this anyway, because here you have B2 and B3 and B1, yeah? So you have a bit of this. So this is not really unique here, but here is explicit throughout all levels. In every level, you actually have an evaluation level, yeah? So it is very explicit here that you're going to rate systems according to the extent to which that they implement the security functionality. Then the other difference is that they are not, that this is not completely hierarchical. Yeah, this is not completely hierarchical. When you go to so from F0 to FB3, these are hierarchical. Yeah, from F0 to FB3, the system is hierarchical. Yeah, but beyond FB3, you find that the rating is no longer hierarchical. So you're saying if you have an FB3 system, yeah, if you have FB3, so from F0, yeah, so you assume you have some systems in between here. You have F1, you have maybe F1, you have F2, F3, and so on and so forth, yeah. And then here you can have your evaluation levels from E0 to E6, yeah. From E0 to E6, from E0 to E6, from E0 to E6. Then you have from E0 to E6, right? So this is where the system actually stops. Then from E0 to E6, yes? So this is where the system stops being hierarchical. What happens after FB3 is that the system now branches out. The system now branches out. So then you have does it allow me to split cells? Yeah. Number of columns 2. So then you have these. So what is happening here is now the system is going to actually split out. That allow me to split. Yeah. So here I split. So we are saying now you have. Now you're going to have things like you're going to have things like FDX. So you have things like FDX maybe I haven't really read up to find the actual layers, so FD, something, and so on and so forth. So what is happening here is that, so for instance, an FDX system, yeah, yeah, you actually have FD1, yeah. So FD1, maybe FD2, and so on and so forth. So what is really happening here is that an FB3 system must implement all functionality in an F0 system, yeah. An FB3 system must have implemented all functionality in an F0 system. So it's like how we say a third year must have completed first year and second year. So an FB3 system must have implemented all functionality in the lower levels. But it does not but when you come to, you know, an FD system which is higher than FB3. So any FD system is higher than an FB3 system. So that implies that all FD systems, yeah, must have implemented functionality of the lower levels. That is true. But then an FDX system does not necessarily implement functionality in an FD1 system. So at this point, the rating is actually branching out. The security rating is actually branching out. So it's like how you have different third years, and they are specializing, or rather, let me use maybe master students. You have different master students who are doing maybe who are doing a master's in computer science, right? But then they will have different specializations. So some would be specializing in networking, others could be specializing in security. So if you have specializations at your graduate level classes, you assume that every computer science student must have done computer science at undergrad, right? So they are fulfilling all the requirements, all the functionality at undergrad. But then not all computer science, the computer science student who does networking does not necessarily implement functionality for the does not necessarily implement all the functionality for the computer science student who is doing who is doing you know, who has a specialization in security. So what you have here is actually specialization. So the key differences that you're going to have let me just have them, you know, side by side. So the key differences that you're going to have in these different so you're going to, let me just turn this into an image so that I can move it about. So we have the image now. So let me just have this okay, it's just let me just take this to the back, and then let me move this to okay, maybe it's too big, it's not accepting to move. So let me just create a new snip and then get rid of this. This is going to take a while. Let me just get a new create a new document. So we have this, which is, you know, which is the ITSEC criteria. So that over there is the ITSEC criteria, and then this over here is the ITSEC criteria. So you can see that if you put them side by side, this is more of a hierarchical. This is fully hierarchical. But we're saying this is not necessarily fully hierarchical. It actually branches out at the top, yeah? It branches out at the top, and then you find that these levels do not necessarily have to implement each other. These are actually sort of parallel levels now, but they'll have to implement all the functionality below them, yeah? They'll have to implement all the functionality below them. There's a third evaluation approach, which is the common criteria, which came which arose as a result of needing to combine these different criteria, because the ITSEC, like I said, is mainly a British slash European standard, and the TSEC is an American standard. And they decided to combine this. For instance, if you have international, if you got to do an international evaluation, and one system was created using ITSEC and the other was created using TSEC, and it can become a bit tricky to reconcile the two. So the common criteria, which we shall not go into deep detail, has the following, defines the following concepts. You have what you call the protection profile, which is the client organization security requirements. So ideally, if you're procuring a new system, you want it to first of all meet your protection profile, which is the level of security that you require. Then the target of evaluation is the system that you want to evaluate, or the system that you want to procure. Then finally, the security target. This is the level of the security that the manufacturer, that the contractor is claiming to provide. So ideally, if you're procuring a new security system, then the security target has got to be greater than or equal to the protection profile, because the protection profile is your requirement, and the security target is the level of security that the contractor is